What's up, Wizards? It's Dev from The Place, and today is a special day. Any day that you get to see Aegis Turtle right there, head on, as soon as you start the video, you know that's going to be a special day. It is the final day of Foundations previews, which is really sad because I have really enjoyed getting to know this set, and I will continue to, probably enjoy diving into it. I like this set a lot. I'll have a lot more to say about that in tomorrow's video, but for now, what we're going to do is go over the best cards from the mostly common and uncommon dump. There are two rares from today that we're going to look at more towards the end of the video, but they dumped like 60, 70, something like that. Mostly commons and uncommons on us today. A lot of them, draft chaff and stuff like that. But what we've done is we picked through everything, and found the cards that I think are like the most interesting to kind of look over. And I think there are a total of 18 of them to kind of check out today. So, about as many as a normal spoiler day used to be back in the day before every spoiler day was 40 cards. You remember that? We had a nice little, we could talk about cards for more than like a minute and a half at a time and really discuss all the things they could do. But now we have to cover 60 cards every day. So it's kind of nice to have an 18 card day, especially with cards like Aegis Turtle, which we're starting off with today, if you hadn't guessed. This is a 1-mana 0/5 turtle. All it does. However, we have, cards, decks in Standard that care about toughness. Let me just put it that way. Decks in which this could potentially be, a 1-mana 5/5, right? Or, in the Fecund Green Shell deck, it could just be like 1 mana to do the, thing that triggers when you play a guy whose butt is bigger than his front half, I don't think this sees too much play. I really don't, but a 1-mana 0/5 is actually a pretty ridiculous amount of toughness to throw onto the table on turn one. It's going to be kind of tough to get past that for a lot of people. This gets past a Monstrous Rage on everything except, well, that's not true. It doesn't get past a Monstrous Rage on too much. Shouldn't have even brought it up, but still, this does get past a lot of stuff in the early turns of the game, so kind of like it. If anything, it at least absorbs the full hit from a Monstrous Rage occurring, so you'll take it from time to time. I don't think it sees any play in Standard, and that's why it's the first card of the day, and honestly, these next 5, 6 cards probably won't see too much play in Standard either, but I thought Turtle was kind of a good honorable mention for the day, because, again, 1 mana for 5 toughness is not a bad rate when you really get down to it, but let's look at the next card, which is Gleaming Barrier. So among the first 2 cards today, between the first 2 cards today, they're both creatures. They have a total power of 0. It's pretty cute, but this is just 2 mana for a 0/4 wall with Defender. When it dies, create a treasure token, and it's an artifact. So maybe an artifact coming into play or dying will have some relevance to you, but yeah, again, a relatively low amount of mana, twice as much as Aegis Turtle, but you get a pretty high amount of toughness. It's a point less than Aegis Turtle. We're just going to judge every card today in the context of Aegis Turtle. But it doesn't have 5 toughness. But this does have a pretty decent amount of toughness that can block until the mid game, and then when it does die on blocks, you get a treasure token. So I actually think this isn't terrible. We've seen it in Standard before, and it didn't really see any play back then. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it sees play day one. I just think it's not god awful. When you compare it to the other like drafty cards that were released today, there's not a whole lot of thinking you can do about those. This, on the other hand, I think you can actually do some thinking. So that's a thinking inception. I think you can think about it. It's because I believe in you and I know you can think, but I still think Gleaming Barrier is kind of a neat card. It's kind of, these first few cards are just all kind of neat cards. That's why they're in the video. Like Elementalist Adept. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 human wizard with flash and prowess. I believe this card is new, if I'm not mistaken. But a flash prowess guy? Okay. He's not amazing. He's really not. I think that there's just like better options in the 2-drop slot in like mono blue tempo, right? Like you've got Fairy Mastermind. Do I really have to name them all? We got Fairy Mastermind. We got that new guy from Dustmourne that taps a creature down when he comes into play, puts a stun counter on it. Again, there's probably just better things to be doing in blue tempo, but he's cool. You don't see a flash prowess guy too often, and I do like that if you have enough mana, you flash him into play on your opponent's combat step, you block with him, and then you play an instant, right? Like you play a removal spell on one of their guys or a pump spell on him or something like that, and then he gets a little bit bigger and can block up or block down or whatever it is. So I don't know. There are cool things about this, and you can really spring a trap on your opponent if you have the mana and cards to do it. That's all sick. But I think it's just like a couple of hairs, not even just one hair, but a couple of hairs off of standard playability. But it's still a cool card. A couple of neat abilities to put together. Gutless Plunderer is up next. 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 2/2 skeleton pirate with death touch. It also has raid. When it enters the battlefield, if you attacked this turn, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards back on top of your library. The rest go into your graveyard. Okay, so again, don't expect too much out of this guy. I'll tell you when we start getting the cards I really expect something out of, but it's worth noting that we just got Finn the Fangbearer, the guy that cares about death touch creatures. Whenever a death touch guy hits your opponent, they get a poison counter. They get 2 poison counters, I believe. So this guy has death touch. You know, it's a lot better than just your average 3 mana 2/2. Because the 3 mana 2/2 death touch kind of changes the entire game, man. The raid ability is cool too. I wish that it put the card in your hand, obviously, but at least it puts, you know, it's kind of like a surveil that's always going to put 2 cards in the yard. Putting 2 cards in the yard is something you're going to want to do occasionally for like various reasons: delirium, threshold, reanimation, right? Just flashback those cards that you put in your yard. There's a lot of things to do. So in a way, in the right deck, it can draw a card by putting the card into your yard and then flashing it back later or whatever. So I kind of like that about it. But apart from that, it just puts like the best of those cards on top, or make sure you get your land drop next turn or whatever. So actually not a terrible card in the limited environment, I think, but not good outside of it. I was going to say like just the right deck in standard, but that's just not true. That's probably not true. But still, good little ETB trigger that's not too hard to enable. Raid's famously easy to enable. And the death touch is always good. I like basically any guy with death touch. But we'll move on to Beskin Ranger. 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 3/3 elf ranger with trample. Whenever another creature you control enters, this guy right here gets +1/+0 till end of turn. Everybody want to be Devilish Valet, but can't nobody do it right. Can't nobody drive the car. I give you the keys and you crash my car. Why you... We got a creature recently that was also kind of reminiscent of Devilish Valet. I think it was a devil in Dustmorn. But we'll apparently we'll never get back to Valet himself. But this is still kind of a neat ability to have in draft, again in limited, where if you have anything that creates, you know, more than 1 token at a time, okay, you know, profit. But I will say in standard, if you do have like Hop to It and other token makers, Gleeful Demolition, stuff like that, that puts like 3 and even beyond more tokens into play over the course of a turn, then like you could engineer this guy to be halfway decent, because he starts as a 3 mana 3/3 trample, and that's like not the worst stats. That's just not bad stats. So like if you play one creature the turn after you play this, he's a 4/3 trample. He attacks as a 4/3 trample on turn 4, and like could be worse. It actually could be very worse. much worse. Very worse. But, you know, if you play this guy on 3 and then on turn 4, you play like Hop to It and another guy, like a Paw Patch Recruit or some whatever, then like he attacks for 7 trample damage on turn 4, and we're kind of getting somewhere. So I don't hate this dude, man. Mostly because he starts at a decent rate already. But I think there's probably better things to do in the 3-drop slot. I think that a lot of the decks that would play cards like Hop to It, Gleeful Demolition, whatever, are just, you know, their curves don't even really go up to 3 unless they're playing an Imidane's Recruiter or a Sanguine Evangelist. They don't have room for this, you know. So I'm just not like too convinced it does anything, but it is kind of neat, you know. Trample was the ability it needed to have to be decent, and it has it. So I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Inspiring Paladin, though, another 3 mana 3/3. This one 2 and a white for a 3/3 human knight. Bars. During your turn, this creature has first strike. During your turn, creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have first strike. So I know I rhyme first strike with first strike, but I'm still counting it there. You get to reading this card from name to final card or final like word of the text box. You get 4 bars. Not bad. But anyway, I just think this dude's cool too. I actually think he has less of a chance of seeing standard play than that last dude. But, you know, 3 mana 3/3 first strike half of the time. We'll take that stat line sometimes. And then, you know, in your Botanical Brawler deck or something like that, I think this guy, just like the last guy, I think this guy's a little bit too expensive for the curve that those decks tend to like. But first strike is a great ability too. It is a great ability to have. Underappreciated one too, and like all the guys in your deck have +1/+1 counters, so you just can't be beat in combat on your turn, you know. So looks a little bit drafty, and honestly looks kind of cubish. Kind of want to try it out, and it looks like a good cube card there. So it's kind of neat, but I'm not sure it breaks through into standard. I just, you know, I'm actually very sure it doesn't. But at the same time, this is a neat little line of text here that you don't see every day. So keep it in mind. Twin Blade Paladin is up next. 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 3/3 human knight. Bars, whenever you gain life, put a +1. I can just keep it. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. As long as you have 25 or more life, this creature has double strike. I'm pretty sure you can make this whole card rhyme too. But yeah, it's another one of these. I'm pretty sure we've seen this one before, if I'm not mistaken. But we've seen a bunch of creatures in this set, period, that like you gain life, they get a +1/+1 counter, you know. In this case, though, this can be, you know, it starts play as a hill giant, a 4 mana 3/3, but you know it can be a 7/7 double strike with fairly low effort on your part, you know. But I think it's worse than most of the other 4-drops that deck has potential access to. We just saw a new version of Alinda. That's a 4 mana 4/4 lifelink and protection from instants, and she does other stuff too. That's really good. We just saw the 4 mana Angel that draws your cards and gets bigger whenever you gain life, like Enduring Tenacity. All these are amazing 4-drops that I don't think this is better than, but still, point it out whenever you see a card like this. Life gain decks look pretty good, especially in Limited, because they have so many ways of enabling themselves. But apart from that, there's also Dazzling Angel, kind of on the same tip. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/3 Angel with flying. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. All right, another one of these effects. In Limited, we have 8 of these now. Well, not 8. We have 2 of them. It's Hinterland Sanctifier, the 1 mana guy, and then we have this now too. So a lot of ways to enable those life gain strategies. This one won't see play in standard, I'm fairly certain. I'm pretty sure. What was it? Social Climber from like New Capenna? That cost 3 mana. It was green, but it did this. It had this line of text. It didn't see any play. Usually we don't like this at 3 mana, but we'll take it at 1 or 1. We don't like it at 2 mana either, you know, but we'll take it sometimes, like Life Creed Duo. But we really want it to just cost 1 mana. So 3 mana is kind of right out. But it's neat. It's an angel. You know, there's going to be an angel deck. I don't know if the angel deck really cares about gaining life, but it's a consideration. And I like the art. Art's pretty nice. Deneen Wilkerson, you did a good job. I like her wings. But this is just all right. It's just all right. A good middle card of the day, I think. Goblin Surprise is up next, though. This is a functional reprint, I think, of You See a Pair of Goblins from the Forgotten Realms set. 3 mana, 2 and a red for an instant. Choose 1. Creatures you control get +2/+0 till end of turn. Or you create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. And so fans of the stream will know that I will point out a Burn Bright every time I see one. I love Burn Bright. I can't stop. Just 3 mana for the first line of text is what Burn Bright was. At instant speed. This, on the other hand, this in the Goblins decks, that we're sure to see, especially when you see the last rare we look at today. In the Goblins decks, I'll kind of take it, dude. It might cost a little bit too much, but if you went wide enough, the first mode can win the game, and the second mode can help you go wide enough once you draw the second copy of it. So I just always like this card. Every time we see this card, I like it. So I wanted to point it out today. But if you wanted a little bit more Goblin nonsense, there's also Frenzied Goblin over here. A single red mana for a 1/1 Gobbo Berserker. Whenever he attacks, you can pay red. If you do, target creature cannot block this turn. This is one of the only cards in the entire video that actually has a standard pedigree behind its name, you know. This has seen play in standard Goblins decks that have actually been important in the same format, standard. You can imagine. I don't know if it'll do that now, but we don't have all the best options for 1-drop goblins. We have a few decent ones, don't get me wrong, but I think that those decks will still want Frenzied Goblin, especially in a format that includes, you know, 3 drops that invalidate your entire, you know, philosophy, especially 4 drops that invalidate your entire philosophy. You don't want their Sheoldred to block. You don't want their Beeza to block. You don't want their Glissa to block. You don't want their Preacher to block. You know, so you don't want their Alinda to block. It's got lifelink. You don't want anything with lifelink to block. But there's like a million things that, you know, a million, let me put it this way, a bunch of game states. It is not an uncommon game state to just like not want their biggest creature to block? Seems obvious when you put it that way, right? Hey, would this game have been better? Would this game have been better for you if their largest creature could not block for the whole game? The answer is probably yes, like most of the time. And Frenzied Goblin is so much better than it looks. Just keeping one dude from blocking of your choice every turn is worth that mana. And it's sometimes, the secret to winning the game. So just keep this card in mind. I think if it's the first time you're reading it, it looks unassuming, but it's actually has the potential at least to be quite good. So next is Quake Strider. Quake Strider Ceratops. This is actually from yesterday, and I didn't get to it. I didn't include it. Which the more I look at it, the more I'm like, how come? I usually do every single card in a season, Foundations, I've done more or less every single card, but yesterday I missed a couple of cards, and those will be in today's video. Quake Strider Ceratops is 6 mana, 3 and 3 green for a 12/8 dinosaur. That's it. That's the whole card. It's completely vanilla. Doesn't actually do anything, but it's kind of another Gigantosaurus, Gigantosaurus is like, what, a 5 mana 10/10. This is a 6 mana 12/8, and they're both vanilla. They're both, I think, available in the limited environment in this. This is uncommon, I think this is actually pretty good. If you can engineer a way of giving it trample, it's actually like almost standard playable. It's 12 powers a lot, dude. Just fling this at somebody, and you're probably having a good enough time. It won't see play in standard. I have to make that clear. I'm almost certain it sees no standard play unless something goes very crazy. I'm not going to say very wrong. It would have to go very right for this card to see any play. But still, it's cool, though. It's a 12/8, man. It's a freaking 12/8, and you need to know about it because you should. If a 12/8 exists, don't you want to know about it? Phyrexian Dreadnought over here, man. Spitfire Legac is back, everybody. Spitfire Legac is back. 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 3/4 lizard with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, this guy deals 1 damage to each opponent. Does that sound familiar? We got Iridescent Vine Lasher in standard already. That deals the damage to target opponent. This is each opponent. In competitive standard, that's the same thing. So are you going to pay 4 mana for this when you already have Iridescent Vine Lasher? Here's my argument. I want to play 8 Iridescent Vine Lashers. For the price I'm paying for this, I could get a bunch of Vine Lashers, especially if I'm like using the Offspring mode on them. This costs 1 more mana than the Offspring mode to get half as many as I'm going to get if I cast Iridescent Vine Lasher with Offspring, but I'm still tempted. I'm still tempted to play the old 8 Vine Lasher deck in Jund or something and do like, Lumra, Aftermath Analyst, bring all my lands back, deal all the damage in the world. I'm going to try to make it work. I'm actually overly excited about this thing being back in standard. And by the way, it's a lizard. Ooh. Doesn't mean it sees play in the lizard's deck, but still, I think that this is actually noteworthy that we have a bunch of this ability in standard right now. I think it's cool. Infernal Vessel is up next as we really start to round the corner and get into cards I think are pretty good, man. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 2/1 human cleric. When it dies, if it wasn't a demon, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It's a demon in addition to its other types. So a 3 mana 2/1, right? No, it's a 3 mana 4/3 actually. It's a 3 mana 2/1. And then it's a 0 mana 4/3. So you really want to sacrifice this guy or just lose it in combat. If you can trade it in combat, that's even better. I don't really want to play a 3 mana 2/1. Most of the time, I don't want to do that. I don't want to play a 3 mana 2/2 or a 3 mana 2/3. I don't even think a 3 mana 2/4 is that impressive. So a 3 mana 2/1 is kind of awful. It really is. But you kind of want it to be fragile. Because when it dies, it Obi-Wan Kenobis. You strike it down, it becomes more powerful than you can possibly imagine. But I don't know. You could probably imagine a 4/3. You know what I'm saying? It's not that hard to imagine. But it is cool that it becomes a demon. You can play this in the Unholy Annex deck if you want to. And then when this guy dies, comes back as a demon, now you'll start gaining life and drawing cards with your Annex. So interesting how many demons we're getting in this set to go along with that card. But even outside of that, Aristocrats decks, this may be a little bit too expensive for where they want to be on curve, all things considered. But, a guy that you sacrifice and he comes back as an even bigger guy that you can sacrifice again if you want to. Like, that's all really, really good. So I kind of don't mind this, even if the price is slightly steep. It's like half a mana too steep, in my opinion. But If it were 2 mana, it would be stupid. This card, the existence of this card at 2 mana would be unconscionable. So I guess 3 makes a lot of sense. But we'll move on to Ancestor Dragon, one of the first of 2 rares today. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 white for Shinron over here. This is a 5/6 dragon with flying. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control attack, you gain 1 life for each attacking creature. It doesn't look like we're getting Muhammadi Jinn in this set, even though they said we're going to get like all the iconic creatures and stuff like that, but we're not getting Muhammadi Jinn. Instead, white gets the 6 mana 5/6 flyer. I don't know why it makes me so upset. It doesn't actually make me upset whatsoever. I just like, you know, whinging, I guess, on the internet. But yeah, this is the Muhammadi Jinn stat line and mana cost and keywords or whatever. The ability is cool, but we also get Linden in this format, in this set. I think it's in the starter collection. And Linden is basically like you gain 1 life for each of your attacking creatures when they attack, which is cool. And I'm pretty sure the triggers stack the way Linden is worded too. The triggers stack on this one. Well, they don't. You only get 1 trigger on this one. I might be wrong on Linden. But on this one you get like 1 large trigger rather than a bunch of little triggers, which could kind of suck. But still, this is very intro packy, you know, like this is very core set looking to me. If this was printed 25 years ago, we would all have stories about that time we won a game with Ancestor Dragon because he was so broken and OP. But nowadays, this is not good anymore, which is really sad. I wish Magic was still this guy. But it never will be again. We've opened Pandora's box. You can't close it. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, baby. So, you know, if Magic were what I wanted it to be still, back on my kitchen table in 1996, I'd be like, dude, this card is like a 8 point something. No, but, it's, you know, nowadays, if we were doing a 10 cards rated video, I'd have to give this like a really sad, reluctant 4.1 or something. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean I don't like it. I do like it. It's cool. But next is Revenge of the Rats. This is the other card that came out yesterday, and I kind of never really got a chance to get to, although I did record like 5 minutes of footage of me talking about this card. That was me dropping my pen. I decided it was too much footage, and I couldn't cut it down to an amount that I liked, so I just cut that part out of the video. Now I get to talk about it today. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 black for a sorcery. Create a tap 1/1 black rat creature token for each creature card in your yard. It also has flashback 2 and 2 black, so the flashback cost is the same as the mana cost. So if you mill this into your graveyard, you just put it into your hand. You don't get to literally do that, but if it goes into your yard, it's effectively in your hand for as long as it's in your graveyard for the same mana cost. That's nuts, dude. I can't tell you how many times I wanted a card like this. I feel like we had something called like Ghoul Caller's Harvest. Is that what it was called? Ghoul Caller's Harvest in Standard that kind of did this, and it made a bunch of 2/2 decayed zombies, and then it flashed back for like 7 mana or something like that. Way too much mana. I would rather have this at a decent mana cost, where if I actually mill it into my yard with all of my mill stuff and my Lurgoyf deck or whatever, I can actually like feasibly, reasonably cast the card later in the game. This is actually quite good, and it's worth noting that we got Impact Trimmers in Standard in this set. We already had War Leader's Call, although I'm not sure you want to go Mardu here, but we have effects like that in Standard. We also have a Rats deck for what that's worth. I think it's worth something. You know, like we have a Rats deck that could probably benefit from putting 10 rats into play or whatever. But the thing, again, that I'm most excited about is these, like, the decks that play 4 Urborg Lorgoy, 4 Cruel Somnophage, 4 Souls of the Lost, or whatever that card is called. And then a bunch of mill creatures like Gnawing Vermin et al. Decks like that might really, really like this card, right? Lurgoy, Cruel Somnophage, whatever. They all go really tall. And they can be defeated by a single chump blocker some of the time because it's really difficult to engineer a way to give those huge dudes trample. The deck has no real way of going wide outside of these like dinky little creatures it plays to mill itself, like Blanchwood Prowler or whatever. Whereas Revenge of the Rats does let this deck actually go wide. And even though the creatures come into play tapped, they can eventually block, and they don't die after they attack. Those are the problems with Ghoul Caller's Harvest, is it put decayed creatures into play, so they die after they attack, and also they cannot block because they have decayed. So it was just not a very good card for the deck as much as it wanted to be. This, I think, is just much better. It only puts half the power and toughness into play, but it sticks around. The creatures can block, so you can make that decision later on what you want to send in, what you want to keep up to block. And if you cast it the first time and then flash it back again, it's a reasonable cost to do both of those things, and it puts a billion creatures into play if you did it right. So I really like that. There's also a bunch of ways of copying it for what that's worth in current standard, but I'm not sure how much that's worth, you know, to be honest. But I just think there is something here. I really do think there's something to this particular card right now. So I've got my eye on it, dude. I'm into it. But next we are, again, we're getting down to the really good stuff, in my opinion. This is a reprint, but it's a fun one. It's Firebrand Archer. 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/1 human archer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this guy deals a damage to each opponent. It's exactly what we needed, dude. We got a little 3 mana dragon in this set that whenever you cast a non-creature or a dragon, he does a damage to any target. We got Gutter Snipe in the starter collection. Gutter Snipe is a 3 mana 2/2 whenever you cast a non-creature spell. I think it might actually be instant or sorcery, but don't quote me. But whenever you cast one of those, it deals 2 damage to an opponent. So now we can curve Archer into Gutter Snipe. And if we do that, we're probably not playing Magic fast enough in Standard, but it's still something I'm really excited about. You know, we just lost Thermo Alchemist and another guy, I think it was Kessig Flame Breather, in the rotation. And now we're getting back a lot of guys like this. You know, we just got an Otter, I believe, in Duskmourn that's also kind of one of these guys, and he has Offspring. So, you know, if you wanted to build this deck again, you could. There's even, honestly, just not only in Foundations, but in a couple of sets recently, there have been cards that increase the amount of non-combat damage that your sources do, right? And they work really well with guys like this and Gutter Snipe and whatever. So I just like the sort of deck that's shaping up. I think that Burn is going to be a real deck in Standard because now it's got, you know, 3 different 1 mana deal some damage to your opponent's spells that go to the dome. It's got 2 different shock effects, and it's got that, you know, new Lava Spike that does 3 damage to the face. It's got Boros Charm. It's got Lightning Helix. It's got Lightning Strike. It's got Stoke the Flames. It's got a lot of stuff at its disposal right now. So I think most of that deck is going to be, you know, Burn. But if it needs to, it's got access to this card, which I actually think is better than Gutter Snipe because it costs less mana. To get you going earlier in the game. And at the end of it all, it's going to add up to 4 or 5 extra damage, which is what you need. You know, that'll win the game sometimes. So I'm a little bit excited about this one. Of all of the Gutter Snipe-like cards that we have now because of Foundations, this I think is my favorite because of the really cheap cost. But next is my favorite lower rarity card of the day, period. And actually, I think it's my favorite card of the day. It's not the last one we'll look at, but I do think this is the one that I am in some ways most excited about, which is weird because it doesn't look like it's that good, but I promise you it is. A single black mana for a 1/1 elf warlock. When this creature dies, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token with flying. It's Doom Traveler. It's Doom Traveler, but in black, and no like, oh, it's a Doom Traveler except it does this. No, it just is Doom Traveler with a relevant creature type. And Doom Traveler was a human. It had a relevant creature type. And if you want to know what Doom Traveler did, it's this card. It's this card. It just is this card. But it's white, and it's a human. And it creates a 1/1 flyer when it dies. I think it makes a spirit. Don't quote me. But still, this has a good creature type, too. It looks like there may be a black-green elves deck in Standard because we got Lathril, right? So if you're looking for elf 1-drops, this could be okay. But this most likely goes in some sort of aristocrats, you know, sacrifice pile, something like that. We already have a black rat from a recent set. I can't remember which one it is, but I think it might be Duskmourn. Either way, we have a black rat that dies and makes a 1/1. We have Harried Spearguard, I think it's called, a red 1-drop that dies and makes a 1/1 as well, and that card has haste. However, we don't have, it's hard to underestimate, or it's hard to overstate, I should say, how good of an ability flying is. You know, none of those guys, if I'm not mistaken, none of the other guys in Standard that die and create a token that is an upgrade of them. Whereas Infestation Sage and Doom Traveler back in the day, they die and create an upgraded version of them. And that has always been fantastic. That has always been very good. You know, the token will get in for a couple of damage, and then you'll sack it to your Blood Artist or to some effect, and your Blood Artist will pop off. So I'm very excited to actually just, no frills, have Doom Traveler in kind of the color that it probably always should have been in to begin with, right? So super excited about this guy. But probably the actual card of the day was Dropkick Bomber over here, old Murphy himself. 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/3 Goblin Warrior. Other goblins you control get +1/+1. You can also pay a red mana. Until end of turn, another target goblin you control gains flying, and when this creature deals combat damage, sacrifice it. So a little Goblin Balloon Brigade stapled to, you know, a Goblin King, more or less. This guy is good. This guy is very good. I would have liked another Anthem effect for Goblin decks. Here we are. Here's a good one. Now we have a 2 mana one. We have this 3 mana one. I think there may even be another, but no, we got this guy. 3 mana is a little bit too much for just a 2/3 Anthem effect. The good news is that this guy has a mana sink that wins you the game. You don't have to worry about sacrificing your guys. This just wins, right? You pay like 3 or 4 mana into it. You make your best goblins have flying, and you win the game that way. So excellent piece. I think not only for like standard goblins, I think it's halfway decent, right? Especially if you drop it in a later turn. If you drop it turn 4, turn 5, it can potentially have value the turn it comes into play aside from just the Anthem. And, you know, kind of surprise, get a goblin through on turn 4, which is pretty good in and of itself. That's just good. But, you know, again, if you untap with it and play and you start having the mana available to get your entire team through, like even if they have a flyer or two, you still get most of your team through. That should win you the game, and that should be decent in standard. But also Commander, maybe even beyond standard competitive environments, right? Like Modern Pioneer, like it could be, but I don't think that this is the piece that Goblins is waiting for to be relevant in those formats again. Or relevant for the first time in Pioneer, if I'm not mistaken. I may be, but still. In Commander, I think this is a very good new little piece. And yeah, you might have to sack them, but maybe you want to sack them. Maybe you get some value from putting them in your yard. Maybe you're playing Wart the Raid Mother or something like the Black-Red Goblins deck in Commander. And there's a lot of reasons you might want to sack dudes in that deck, right? So you can turn it into an upside. I'm fairly certain, the sacrifice thing. But in competitive 1v1s, especially in a format like Standard, it just doesn't have as many options as other formats. I think this might be a great way to win the game. Excellent way of winning the game. So, you know, cool. You can also use it on defense if you're really desperate, but you probably won't. It's just a mode on the card that I should point out. But one way or the other, man, I just kind of like everything about this. It looks a little expensive to some people on the internet from what I've seen so far, but I really think that we're underappreciating this activated ability. I think the activated ability is very, very good. Whether you're using it on one huge dude or a whole team of guys, it'll just win you the game. So, yeah. That's all the cards from not only today, but Foundations. We're going to do the top 50 soon. We'll do the top 10 sleepers. I'm getting together with Power Dragon to talk about some of the overrated and underrated cards from the set. So it's a lot of content before it's all said and done. And I think tomorrow I'm going to end up dropping the big video where I just really give all my thoughts about how I felt about Foundations as a set. And for that matter, I'll end up talking a little bit about the Universes Beyond decision that they made at the beginning of the week, where now we know that Universes Beyond is going to be standard legal. It's going to be half the sets that they release. You know, I've got a lot to say about that, and I think that'll be tomorrow's video, and it'll kind of, you know, go into my thoughts on this set too. But for now, that's all the individual cards, until that is, of course, the thing I forgot. I can never forget this. Until we go live on Twitch to rate every single card in the entire set, which we do every time a set comes out, even if the set's 400 cards. Can't wait for this one. Might be the longest one ever, but you know, the idea is to break our speedrun record every time, but we never actually do. So join us on Twitch, follow over there, link in the description, link to Patreon if you want to support us. Patreon support is always very, very much appreciated. We need it to keep the channel going and the lights on and making content and all that. So I appreciate it if you'd consider that. Apart from that, if you want to help me out for free, just hit the button shaped like a thumb and sub to the sandwich so you get all that content coming up. But for now, more or less Allski Kowalski. Just let me know how you felt about everything down there in the comments section and how you feel about Foundations at large. And I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.